Welcome to another deep dive. You know how this works. We take something that has you wondering, fascinated, or just plain creeped out and we dig in. We dissect it. And today we're going deep into a case that's, frankly, the stuff of nightmares.
Yeah, we're heading to 1930s Stockholm for this one.
Stockholm, Sweden. 1932 to be exact. The Atlas vampire murder. And honestly, even just saying the name sends chills down my spine.
I get it. It's got all the elements. A brutal murder, a victim whose story is just heartbreaking, and then that extra layer of bizarre, unsettling ritual, the blood drinking.
Exactly. We've got some historical accounts of this crime that paint a pretty vivid picture, and, well, our mission today is to try and make sense of it all, or at least get as close as we can. We'll lay out the facts, sift through the theories, and see if we can figure out why this case, almost a century old, still has such a hold on us.
Sounds good to me.
All right, let's rewind back to May 4th, 1932. We're in the Atlas district of Stockholm, and the police get called to an apartment.
The apartment of Lilly Lindeström, a 32-year-old woman working as a sex worker. What they find inside? It's not pretty.
Not pretty at all.
Yeah.
From what I've read, Lily was found in her bed, naked, face down.
Right.
She had been brutally beaten, skull crushed. But that's not even the worst part.
No. The worst part, the part that really sets this case apart, is the blood-stained ladle found near the body. Not the murder weapon, but evidence that someone had been drinking Lily's blood. And that's where things take a truly dark turn.
Yeah, that's a detail that takes this from just a murder, even a brutal one, to something else entirely. And on top of that, there were no signs of forced entry, meaning Lily probably knew her attacker, let them in willingly.
Right. Which adds a whole other layer of complexity, doesn't it? I mean, it narrows down the suspects in a way, but it also makes you think, who in her life was capable of this?
Absolutely. That lack of forced entry implies a level of trust, but tragically misplaced, as we know. So the Stockholm police, they launch a full-blown investigation, interviewing clients, acquaintances, trying to piece together Lily's last hours.
Yeah. And there's that one witness, right? Someone who saw a man visiting Lily the night of the murder.
Right. But the witness couldn't give a good description. So a male visitor, that's all they had to go on. Not much to work with.
Not at all. And if that wasn't enough, the crime scene itself throws up even more questions. Like the fact that it was wiped down, almost meticulously. Fingerprints, evidence, gone.
Someone was trying hard to cover their tracks. Not exactly the actions of someone who just snapped in the heat of the moment.
Exactly. This was planned, or at least there was a very deliberate attempt to get away with it. And then there's the semen found on Lily's body. Now, back then, they couldn't use it for identification like we can today, but it does tell us there was a sexual encounter, most likely around the time of the murder.
And then, of course, there's that ladle. So it's like this macabre centerpiece that we keep circling back to.
It's not just a bloody weapon, it's a specific tool, chosen, used for a very specific purpose, drinking the victim's blood.
It implies a level of premeditation, almost ritualistic, or maybe just deeply, deeply disturbing.
Yeah, it's hard to shake that image. And despite all their efforts, the police never found a suspect. The trail went cold, leaving behind this huge, unanswered question mark.
Which brings us to the theories. Because when we don't have concrete answers, our minds try to fill in the gaps. And in this case, the possibilities are as fascinating as they are terrifying.
For sure. Without hard evidence, people started grasping at straws. And one of the first things that grabs you is the blood drinking, right? It's hard to ignore. And that leads to the idea of a killer with a blood fetish, someone with, for lack of a better term, vampiric tendencies.
So not just someone violent, but someone driven by this urge to consume blood. An early serial killer, maybe, with a very specific, very gruesome MO.
Yeah, and that ladle reinforces that, doesn't it? It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing. It feels premeditated, like it was part of a fantasy.
Right. And then, of course, there's the ritual murder theory.
Which takes us down the rabbit hole of secret societies, the occult. Were there groups operating in Sweden back then? Could Lily have been involved? Targeted?
It's a darker path to go down. But the nature of the crime does kind of invite those thoughts. The blood drinking has all these historical and cultural connections to rituals. And when there are no other clear motives, well, you have to consider everything.
You do. And then there's the theory that it was a client.
Given what Lily did for a living, it's sadly not out of the realm of possibility. A violent client, maybe someone with mental health issues, and the blood drinking, as horrifying as it is, could have been part of some kind of breakdown, a power trip, or God knows what else.
It's the most straightforward explanation in a way, but still utterly horrific. And then you can't forget the media angle, the sensationalism.
The Atlas vampire. It's a name that's both catchy and chilling. But how seriously can we take the idea of an actual vampire? Someone who believes they need blood to survive.
Well, the human mind is a complex thing. There are documented cases of people with clinical vampirism, or at least with certain paraphilias that might be related. So while it's probably the least likely scenario, the sheer strangeness of the case keeps it on the table, even if just a little bit.
It's like each of these theories tries to make sense of something that just doesn't make sense.
Right. It's trying to impose order on chaos. And yet the case remains unsolved.
Why do you think that is? What made it go gold?
Well, you have to remember, this was the 1930s. Forensic science wasn't what it is today. DNA analysis, which might have given us a suspect from the semen, was decades away. Back then, they relied on witnesses and whatever physical evidence they could find, and in this case, it just wasn't enough.
So even if we wanted to try and solve it now with modern techniques, the evidence is probably long gone.
Most likely, yeah. And what makes it even more intriguing is that it's so unique. As far as we know, there's been no other case in Sweden quite like this. The brutality of the beating, the very specific act of drinking blood with a ladle, it's never been repeated.
So is this a one-time thing? One disturbed individual who just disappeared?
It's possible. And that's part of what makes this case stick with people, I think. It's the brutality, the mystery, the unanswered questions, and then that unsettling image of the blood-stained ladle. It's like a symbol of something we just can't comprehend.
It's a case that refuses to stay buried, even after all these years,
Yeah.
almost 100 years later, and it still has a hold on the public imagination. It's a reminder that some things are just unexplainable.
Maybe. Or maybe it's a reminder that some secrets stay buried no matter how hard we dig. And sometimes the not knowing is what's truly unsettling. It makes you wonder, what else is lurking in the shadows?
It's a thought that'll keep you up at night. And that's the Atlas vampire murder. A case closed, but definitely not forgotten.
A chilling reminder that some mysteries, well, they just refuse to die.
Until next time, keep those lights on.
And maybe check your silverware drawer, just in case.